Committee here for SANDAC. We have now started the recording. Today is September 17th. And if you didn't know, today is actually the City of National City's 134th birthday. And I'm gonna wear the National City swag chain that I got made for our birthday. And it spins, check that out. So a happy 134th birthday for the City of National City. And I'm very proud to be your chair and representing National City, but chair here for the Public Safety Committee. And before we get started, I'd like to ask our interpreter to be introduced and walk us through how to access our interpretive services for today.
Thank you, Mayor Sotelo Solis. As the mayor just indicated, we do have simultaneous interpretation available. To use the service, please scroll down to the bottom of your Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Then click on the interpretation icon. It looks like a little world, and then select English as your language. If you are joining through the Zoom mobile app on a cell phone, tablet, or other mobile device, first press the ellipsis, then interpretation, and then choose your language. And finally, click on mute original audio if you do not wish to hear the original Spanish law in the background. Buenas tardes y bienvenidos, bienvenidas. Como indicó la alcaldesa, estamos ofreciendo servicio de interpretación simultánea para esta sesión. Para hacer uso del mismo, por favor, desplácese a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen sus controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, parece un globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish o español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, en celular, tableta, etcétera, presione primero los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Por último, si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio o silenciar audio original. Gracias and thank you, Mayor.
Gracias, Carlos. So now we go into the first thing on our agenda. Let us all put our right hand over our heart and start the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. And so before we go and jump straight into the business of today's meeting, I just want to make sure and ask our clerk to confirm that we have quorum. Ms. Sylvia?
Yes, Chair, we do have a quorum.
Outstanding. I'd like to remind everyone of our process for both member and public comments. Members are asked to use the raised hand feature down at the bottom of the Zoom toolbar and turn on their cameras when you have a comment or question. And then I'll go ahead and recognize you. I'd like to again thank Vice Chair Campillo for being here and being part of the leadership. If you are a member of the public and would like to speak on any item, please use the raised hand icon, again, at the bottom of the Zoom toolbar. And once we reach that item on the agenda, if you are calling into the meeting, please press *9 on your phone if you would like to comment on an item. All comments, whether emailed or live, will be made part of the meeting's record. All right, and with that, we'll go ahead and start off with item number 1, approval of the meeting minutes. If a member of the public would like to make a comment, please raise your hand now. Are there any members of the public wishing to address us, Ms. Sylvia? Clerk Sylvia.
No, Chair, no comments from the public.
Great. Are there any members of the Public Safety Committee that'd like to make any comments on this item?
Thank you, Chair. I will, no comments, but I would like to make the motion.
I have a motion from Vice Chair Campillo. Do I hear a second?
Second from Musgrove.
A second from Councilmember Musgrove. Any discussion? Seeing none, please call the roll.
For South County, Chair Sotelo Solis.
Sotelo Solis, aye.
For County of San Diego, Joel Anderson.
Aye.
For City of San Diego, Councilmember Campillo.
Yes.
For East County, Councilmember Goebel.
Yes.
For North County Coastal, Councilmember Blackburn. North County Coastal is absent. For North County Inland, Councilmember Musgrove.
Musgrove, aye.
For County Chiefs Sheriffs Association, Chief Barzo.
Aye.
For County Chiefs Sheriffs Association, Chief Armijo, apologize.
Okay, I'll abstain.
For Regional Fire Emergency Medical Services, Chief Vogt.
Aye.
For San Diego County District Attorney, Commander Rutzel.
Aye.
For San Diego Police Department, Assistant Chief Conley.
Aye.
And for San Diego County Sheriff, Sheriff Gore. Would Under Sheriff Martinez be present? San Diego County Sheriff's is absent. The item passes.
Outstanding. Thank you, Sylvia. And if you recognize or have a new or recognize that we have a new voice as our clerk, we want to welcome Miss Sylvia to the team. Barbara Jean has officially retired, so we got a new team member here. Yay, Sylvia. This is her first time, so we want to give her, again, that flexibility, but also too, hey, baptism by fire. This is it. So thank you again. We go on to item 2 of our agenda. It is public and member comment regarding any issues not on this agenda. If a member of the public would like to comment, please raise your hand now. And I will take a 2-second pause. Clerk Sylvia, are there any members of the public wishing to address us on any item not on today's agenda?
There are no hands from the public.
Great. Members of the Public Safety Committee? Seeing none, we move on to item 3. Item 3 is the Executive Director report, and we see Director Igrata here to provide that. You are muted, sir.
You would think after 18 months of this, we'll get this right? Thank you.
It happens.
Thank you, Chairwoman Satala Solis, Mayor Solis, Vice Chair Campillo, committee members. Good morning to all of you, or good afternoon to all of you. It's been a while since I saw you last. We were dark in August. We were actually supposed to be in person this month, but we delayed it due to rising COVID cases for your safety and safety of everyone. But I also want to inform you that all of our staff were back to the office in person September 7th, all 400, some of them. And, you know, I hid in my office because that's not a popular thing with my team, but we're learning to coming back to the office, working together, serving the public, opening to the public, and doing what we're supposed to do to move this region forward. I am grateful for the team who were as enthusiastic, as hardworking as they were when they were working remotely, but we're back in the office and working on behalf of San Diegans. I will be sending an email out to the board and policy committees in the next month or so about when we think the appropriate time for the board and the policy committee to be back in person. I can tell you that your chair is sitting next to me somewhere in an office here in the office, so she's not, well, she's remote for you, but she is not remote for us today. Let me just also recognize Misu de la Hispanidad, or the Hispanic American Heritage Month, which we celebrate from September 15th during October, through October 15th. September 16th is Mexicans' National Day or Independent Day. And it's important to acknowledge the significant contribution of Latinx people have made to the culture, community, and economy of our amazing binational region. I am proud of Sandag employees who celebrate our diversity, showing our commitment to advance equity and inclusion. Yesterday also marked the conclusion of Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is the holiest day in the Hebrew year known as the Day of Atonement. People of the Jewish faith fast and spend the day in prayer and asking for forgiveness. Wishing all of them easy fast and good final season. A couple of items, and I'm really sorry for those members who had to hear that today at the policy committee. So I apologize to you because you'll hear it twice. I'm gonna update you in the agency priorities, especially the major priorities. And I'm gonna start with the 5 big moves, the regional transportation plan. As you know, the public comments period was closed. We received close to 1,000 comments. We're responding to them. Every comment is important. We did an outreach during the pandemic with all the challenges. But I want you to know our desire is to reach more San Diegans. We are starting an extensive outreach and educational program for the 5 big moves all over San Diego. And that is not limited to just public meetings or required public meetings, but as I will be talking to the leadership next week, we are going to be reaching many more San Diegans, tens of thousands of San Diegans through social media, through sports events, because San Diegans deserve to know about what we're planning for them. San Diegans deserve to be in the know and all the things that we're talking about in the regional transportation plan. I couldn't be prouder of the team. I couldn't be prouder of the leaders who got us to this point, because the 5 big moves, the regional transportation plan, is about the future, is about future mobility, is about providing and reimagining the transportation system for our children and grandchildren. I hope you are as proud as I am, because I think we're charting an amazing future to do that. Parallel effort with the plan is the legally required environmental impact report, EIR. Our staff have put this out until October 11th, discuss alternatives. I particularly want to thank Keith Greer, Kristen, and Samantha for their amazing work. A small team, but a mean team, doing amazing work. And this morning, the Joint Policy Committee heard about the EIR. Just a couple of updates on the connectivity of the region and the fact that the 5 big moves rely heavily on future technologies, heavily on available data. Last month, I had the pleasure of traveling to Vegas. It was really hot, 116 degrees, with Mayor Gloria and a few of my members, to actually ride the Tesla X and Y in the tunnel that the Boring Company, Elon Musk Boring Company, built from the convention center to the Strip. A trip that in the tunnel takes 3 minutes, driving on the surface takes about an hour. They completed the 1.8 mile with 3 stations, 1 underground, 35 deep. The total price tag was $52 million. My question is, how much money did they lose? And they won't answer that. But the bottom line is, future technologies are important. One of the 5 big moves is a flexible fleet. So look for next month, SANDAG will be releasing a request for information, a request actually for public-private partnership for a 15 mile of tunnels and open to any part of the region with the following performance outcomes: underground, driveless electric system that would connect our amazing, beautiful landmarks in San Diego, connect to the airport, to Pitco Park, Balboa Park, the zoo, the SeaWorld. And we would look for the private sector innovation, but we're going to go further than just asking the private sector to give us their ideas. We're going to tell them we're going to be your partners. We're going to invest real money into this public-private partnership. So we don't have to wait until 2035 or 2050 to start implementing the 5 big moves. I can tell you the opportunities are great and exciting. I can tell you the interest from the private sector is great and exciting. We're going to release that RFI next month, do the selection sometimes in November, and start truly working toward the future system soon. A couple of other items. Otay Mesa 2, I'm happy to report that the high-level dialogue between our country and Mexico took place this month, earlier at the beginning of this month. On our side, our Vice President Kamala Harris, and on the Mexican side, the Mexican President were leading the meetings. And I'm happy to report that border infrastructure, Otay Mesa 2 is one of those border infrastructure projects, was on the agenda for this meeting. This is how important the work we're doing, the MOU we signed. And I want to thank all the team members from Caltrans, District 11, SANDAG, and all our partners making this very close to meeting the opening of the facility by September 2024. As hopefully some of you went to the celebration of completing the largest infrastructure project in San Diego's history, and that is the Mid-Coast. Jim Lithicum, who's listening in this meeting, told me that we're still on budget, on time to deliver the largest infrastructure project in the country. And frankly, through my career, I've been through many projects, major ones, and I have never seen a project of this size, of this magnitude, of this complexity. To be able to say on time, on budget, that tells you about the team that's working here for SANDAG. So for that, Jim and your team, we're grateful. I can't wait to turn it over to our partner at MTS to operate. But if you haven't participated in the celebration and the trial ride, please let us know. We're going to have a big celebration for the community, tens of thousands of community members on November 21st. Please come attend, eat, and celebrate with us and the rest of the community. Chair Solis, I'm going to conclude my report. Sorry it took longer than normal, but be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you again so much, Hassan. Are there any questions for members of the virtual dais here? I think it's great always as elected officials and public servants to know that this, the Mid-Coast Trolley is on time, on budget and under budget for that matter. And that we, are standing by what we said we were going to use our taxpayer dollars for. Any questions, Ed? I see your camera on. Did you have a question for Hassan?
Yeah, sorry, just prepping for the next item.
Okay. Well, you look fabulous, just so you know. Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Hassan. I believe we don't have any questions, so you are off the hook. You're welcome to join us. Continue here at the meeting. All right. We now go on to, well, let me ask the clerk. Are there any members of the public wishing to address us on this item? Ms. Sylvia, are there any members of the public wishing to address us on this item?
No, Chair, I don't see any.
Okay, thank you again so much. We now move on to the next item, which is item 4. Chief Varso, you're up.
Good afternoon. So the Chiefs and Sheriffs Management Committee met on September 1st. As many of you know, our previous chair, Neil Gallucci, the chief of Carlsbad PD, has retired. So I cannot say it was a hard-fought campaign, but the committee members unanimously voted me as the new chair, and then Oceanside Police Chief Fred Armijo as the vice chair for the Chiefs and Sheriff Management Committee. ARGIS Director Eric Wood provided a review of proposed changes to the current ARGIS fee structure. The future proposal will be coming with a request to approve and fees. At our next meeting, we'll be discussing that further in October. Eric Wood also presented an update on regional narrative sharing through ARGIS. A group of subject matter experts from the data contributing agencies are being asked to recommend a solution to facilitate narrative sharing amongst the other data contributing agencies and data we already share. Eric Wood also reported on the differences between California incident-based reporting system and the national incident-based reporting systems, and changes within those systems and how some inconsistencies are going to impact crime reporting in our region. And then finally, Chula Vista Police Department's Captain Don Redman provided a management committee demonstration of Live 911. Live 911 is a program that provides real-time data and audio sharing of 911 calls to our field personnel. And response, we hope will improve response time, situation awareness, mutual aid, and deconfliction stuff out in the field. And several of the agencies have expressed an interest in further exploring that pilot project. Our next management meeting is on October 6th, and that is the end of my report.
Thank you so much, Chief. And it's good to hear that your colleagues believe in you and voluntold you to be in this, this new leadership.
Absolutely appropriate.
Well, we appreciate your continued leadership. With that, are there any questions for Chief? Seeing no questions, are there any members of the public wishing to address or ask any questions?
No, Chair, there are no members to address.
Okay, great. This was for information only, and we are moving on to item 5. Chief Wood, you're up. Did I say that right?
Vote, yes, that's close.
Okay, Chief Vote.
Well, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. The county fire chiefs met on September 2nd, and some of the items of discussion included the effects on ambulances countywide of offload delays and diversion at our hospitals that are impacted not only by a large number of people seeking medical attention at emergency rooms, but also the staffing issues that I think all employers in the public and the private sector are experiencing. Another item, fire season. So the larger fires up in Northern California, and when I say larger, they've been historically large this year, seem to be winding down, which is good news. They're winding down to the point that many of our strike teams, most if not all, have returned to the San Diego County area, including also management overhead positions for some well-deserved rests, some maintenance of equipment, and to reset because, as we all know, we're entering into the fall season in Southern California, which typically brings a series of Santa Ana winds. And in fact, for the first time this year, I received a weather report of a Santa Ana event scheduled to hit Monday, Tuesday. Fortunately, very, very mild. As a matter of fact, the Santa Ana wind threat indexes don't even register it as a threat at all. So, but again, we do know what the weather brings in September and in October and even into November and December. So more to follow on that for sure. We also had a very good presentation from Miles McPherson on the third option program that emphasizes cultural and community similarities over emphasizing differences. And it's a program that's available to government and private sector organizations to mend community relations, and fire departments throughout the county are looking at this as something that we may want to participate and adopt as a training program. And lastly, we discussed at length the staffing issues that are really plaguing the fire service, not just in San Diego County, but statewide as well. The effects of attrition, the many and long deployments and recruitment challenges right now, the effects that the pandemic had on the training pipeline of new employees are all affecting our ability to maintain our staffing levels. So that concludes my report, unless there are any questions.
All right, are there any questions from members of the virtual dais here for Chief Fulton? Are there any members of the public wishing to address us on this item?
Chair, there are no members wishing to address.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. And again, it's always interesting when we hear about the Santa Anas and how that actually plays into, you know, the fire, the risk of fire. And I know I had the opportunity to go to the emergency, I don't know that it's emergency, but the SDG&E weather station. And it was just impressive to see just how many instruments need to be used by both public safety and, you know, the public utilities to make sure that our community is safe and they're ahead of potential fire danger. So with that, that was for information only. Thank you, Chief. We'll now go into item 6. Dr. Burke, take it away.
Thank you. Kendall, I'll just wait for you to pull up the PowerPoint. There it is. Thank you. If you could go to the next slide, please. So I hope that everybody who is on the meeting right now did get our mid-year crime report that came out yesterday, as well as the CJ Flash. And this product would not be possible without the cooperation and support of all the member agencies here at Sandag. So we gratefully appreciate that. We got a lot of coverage yesterday in the local news about it. And some of the questions I got was, why do we do this? Why does this matter? And I explained that if we waited for federal statistics to come out for San Diego County, we would not be able to look at the information in the timely way that we are. One of the goals of Sandag is to truly be a data-driven agency, and that includes providing data to you all as our public servants, as our policymakers. And we also try to offer the historical trends. So we work closely with Eric Wood and Argis in doing that. And again, without the, thank you very much, Chief Arso and Chief Armeo, for your staff's cooperation. So what we do is we look at data twice a year. If this is your first time seeing this report, last year obviously was a year that was unlike any other year. So traditionally we look, we base most of our comparisons just on 1 year, but what we wanted to do here was look at mid-year 2021 to 2020 and 2019. And you'll see why when we get into some of the numbers. We share data with both the region and individual jurisdictions. We are still looking at UCR crime stats because they are doing that transition to CYBERS, NIBERS that Chief Arso reported that Eric was describing. We'll be sharing more information about that with you all at an upcoming PSC meeting. And then because it's such an unusual year, we're still not totally back to normal. We did do additional analysis by month over time to look and see how some of the trends have changed. So we'll be sharing those stats with you all in this presentation as well. Next slide, please. And I always like to offer this caveat when you see these numbers. Not only these are 7 crimes that are reported to the FBI: homicide, rape, robbery, aggravated assault, burglary, larceny, and motor vehicle theft. So it does not include identity theft. It does not include other types of drug offenses or DUIs, but also it doesn't include crime that the public doesn't report to law enforcement. And we know from victimization surveys that only about 41% of violent crime is reported to local law enforcement. You can see it varies by crime type, with rape being one of the most underreported crimes at 34%, and only about 33% of property crime is reported. And that again varies. Obviously, motor vehicle thefts are most likely to be reported for insurance reasons, but even burglaries and other types of theft only are reported about 1 in 4 or 1 in 2. So just to remember that when you see these numbers. Next slide, please. So this shows our annualized violent crime rate for the past 10 years. And in the first half of 2021, it was 3.64 per 1,000 residents. We do look at residents, and that's important, especially when we get into property crime. It doesn't reflect necessarily who may go into a jurisdiction for work or for some other type of leisure or recreational activity. And it was an increase from the first half of 2020. It was an increase from 2019 as well. And it actually was the second highest rate that we've had in the past 10 years. You can see the highest was in 2012. We do go further back with the annual crime rate. And it was 9% higher than it was in 2019 and 14% higher than it was last year. If you can go to the next slide. This shows where we get into the different types of crime types. So again, the yellow bars are showing the comparison from 2019 to 2021. And then the blue bars are showing 2020 to 2021. And you can see that for homicide, we had more homicides in 2021 than we did in 2020. But it actually was lower than it was last year at this time. Rape, we had a big increase with that blue bar from the last year, 23%. But I think that really reflects, and I'll show this when we get into the rape numbers, crimes of opportunities. When we were on shutdown, especially younger individuals were more likely to be rape victims. We weren't out in public interacting with one another to have that, that opportunity. Not that that's a positive opportunity. But you can see that the number is actually lower than it was in 2019. Robberies were both down in compared to 2019 and 2020, and then aggravated assaults were up, both whether we compare it to 2019 or to 2020. Next slide, please. This shows your jurisdictions and around the region. We combine all the sheriff's unincorporated areas. And for the jurisdictions, Coronado, Del Mar, Solana Beach, and Poway actually had numbers too small to compare. This is 2021 to 2020. If a number is smaller than 30, we think it can really give an artificial interpretation of how high or low a change has been. But you can see that 4 jurisdictions actually had a 1-year decrease, including Carlsbad, Escondido, Vista, and Santee, and then the rest, 11, all had increases. The increases varied, the violent crime rates varied from 0.84 in Coronado to 6.41 in Lemon Grove. They are ordered in size of what their crime rates were from low to high is what the order is, and that's what the bars are. And then the colors denote whether they had, again, the number too small to compare, a decrease or an increase. Next slide, please. So now we're going to delve into some of the crimes by type. This shows how many homicides there were in each of the first 6 months of both 2019, 2020, and 2021. You can see the numbers. We had 38 homicides in 2019, 54 in 2020, and 48 in 2021. Again, San Diego, and I did say this to a number of the news stations yesterday, remains one of the safest U.S. cities, U.S. Regions, especially among larger metropolitan areas. But I thought it was just some interesting statistics there about, you could see that 3 of the months we did have more homicides in 2021 compared to the other 2 years. Next slide, please. So rape was down considerably last year. You can see it was up compared to last year, but not so much compared to 2019. In January and February, we were still lower than we were before the pandemic started in 2020 in January and February, but then we have had more, 80% more rapes were reported to law enforcement in May of 2021 compared to May of 2020. With both rape and domestic violence, I do think this does reflect actual incidences, and if any of the chiefs would like to share any of their perspectives when I'm done going through the slides, that would be great. But it's important to always note with especially rape and domestic violence that increasing numbers could also sometimes reflect better reporting if there's outreach or encouraging people to share that information with law enforcement. So it may not always be a bad thing if you see better numbers. Next slide, please. Robbery was down. We up a little bit in February. We saw some slight increases in May and June, but again, robbery was down both compared to 2019 and 2020. And then the next slide, please. Aggravated assaults, this was a pretty consistent trend. We saw more aggravated assaults, and that's distinguished from a simple assault because either a weapon is involved or there's great bodily injury across each of the 6 months in 2021 compared to 2020. Next slide, please. And what's more disturbing, I know the city of San Diego just passed an ordinance with ghost guns. There's been a lot of stories in the paper about shootings, and I have heard this, I can't take credit from it, anecdotally from law enforcement and also emergency services, that trauma care has gotten better over the years. And so that many times aggravated assaults that would have been a homicide previously are now more likely to be an aggravated assault where the victim does not die. And what we did here is on the chart on the left, it shows the percent of crimes with a firearm. And you can see 60% of homicides in 2021 involved a firearm compared to 54% in 2020. It was consistent for the robberies, about 1 in 5, 18%. The aggravated assaults went up from 14% to 18%, which may not seem that large. But then when you go look at the slide at the right, this shows how did we have the change in the number of crimes overall is the yellow bar, and then the crimes with that crime with a firearm. So homicides, again, we had fewer in 2021 than 2020. It was down 11%, but actually the same number were committed with a firearm. Robberies, we had fewer robberies overall, 7% fewer, but also fewer robberies with a firearm. But aggravated assaults, I mentioned it was up 20% overall, but those aggravated assaults with a firearm were up 55%, which I think is definitely a statistic that we wanted to get out there. Again, to talk about ghost guns and the issues with gun violence. Next slide, please. There was a lot of speculation about domestic violence incidents and what would happen when individuals were not around mandated reporters due to stay-home orders. as well as would individuals with the financial issues that they could be experiencing as a result of COVID and the pandemic be less likely to report a DV incident. And we didn't see any really strong trends that would suggest that, but we have seen in the past 4 months of 2021, March, April, May, and June, that there have been increases across the region in the number of domestic violence incidences that were reported. Again, the same high as it was with rapes for May. Next slide, please. So now turning to property crime, most property crime, about 9 in 10 of the crimes that are reported to law enforcement are property crimes in the region. And we did have an increase again, you can see from 2020 when it was 14.67 per 1,000 residents to 16.17. But I think it's important to note here that we actually had the second lowest rate. So for violent crime, we had the second highest rate in the past 10 years at mid-year. Here we still had the second lowest rate. So a lot of property crime is either not happening or not being reported across the region. Next slide, please. Going into how do we compare from 2019 to 2020, looking at the blue bars, which are compared to 2020 to last year, again, property crime was up 10%, burglaries were down 3%, larceny was up 10%, motor vehicle theft was up 21%. Going back a little bit further to see how did we compare pre-pandemic, the overall property was still down 1%, burglary down 8%, larceny down 4%, but motor vehicle theft was up compared to both of those years. Next slide, please. How did the jurisdictions vary? Everybody had enough property crime to get either a yellow or blue line. You could see 4 jurisdictions actually had 1-year decreases of 2021 compared to 2020, including Poway, Santee, Vista, and El Cajon. All 15 of the other reporting agencies had increases in their property crime from 2020 to 2021. Next slide, please. We also, with the burglaries, are one crime category, but we can distinguish between residential and non-residential. And we saw last year during the pandemic that residential burglaries really dropped because people were more likely to be home. Non-residential burglaries, there were increases because businesses were potentially locked up when they couldn't operate. And you can see here where the yellow bar shows residential burglaries. And I think it's interesting when you see from January to April, we still had decreases compared to 2020, but in May and June, we have had increases. And then for the non-residential, it's actually the opposite. We had increases in January and February of 2021 compared to the earlier year, 2020. But since March, we've actually had fewer non-residential burglaries. Next slide, please. This is when I go out and I do to speak to public groups, I try to emphasize about forced entry, and many people, burglars are through open doors or windows, but we actually saw that more burglaries in both 2020 and 21 involved forced entry. And so again, if the chiefs have any thoughts on that at the end of the presentation, that would be great. I'm not sure if it reflects any sort of desperation or greater attempts to try to get into residences and businesses. Next slide, please. Larceny was up in 5 of the 6 months. You can see again, May was a busy month across the region, the greatest increase. Next slide, please. This slide's a little bit tricky. Next slide, please. Because with the lines and the bars. So we have different categories of larcenies across the region. So what the bars show is what's the most common type of larceny. So you can see 42% of all larcenies that are reported to law enforcement are from a motor vehicle. The second most common type of larceny in 2021, representing about 1 in 4, was from buildings, followed by other, which includes coin-operated machines, shoplifting, bikes, motor vehicle parts, pickpocketing. The blue line shows how were the changes from 2021 to 2020. And you can see there was an 86% increase in motor vehicle parts, which sounds pretty dramatic. But again, I just want to note that that's 8% of all larcenies. But there was a 15% increase from motor vehicles. We know more people are riding bikes around the region, which is a good thing for active transportation. That had a 13% increase in stolen bikes, but actually pickpocketing was down 30% and shoplifting was down 13%. Next slide, please. Motor vehicle thefts, we've reached out to law enforcement and some of our task forces, and we're not really sure what's going on. So again, if any of the chiefs would like to share any information, but again, double-digit increases in 5 of the 6 months in motor vehicle theft. Next slide, please. And then finally, hate crimes. We do report hate crimes at mid-year. We had 45 hate crime events reported across the region in 2021 compared to 2020. Race is consistently, both locally and nationally, one of the primary motivators noted. It was a smaller percentage in 2021 compared to 2020, 64% compared to 76%. And of the 28 hate crimes attributed to race in 2021, 18% included Asian victims, which was up from 6% in 2020. But we really want to make note of the small number of individuals, not saying that 2 or 5 is insignificant when you're the victim by any means. But I understand that a lot of the DA's offices and law enforcement are really trying to encourage people to report hate crime incidences, and it is being taken seriously. Next slide, please. So that is the presentation. I think I have the next one too, but I'd be happy to answer any questions from the public or any of our members on these data.
Sylvia, do we have any members of the public wishing to address us on this item? This is item 6 and the presentation that was provided.
Yes, Chair Stella Solis, we do have Tim Palash. Tim, you could go ahead when you're ready.
Thank you. I'm a physician here in San Diego. I just have a question. Do we keep statistics on these aggravated assaults or assaults for involvement of alcohol intoxication?
We don't have it with the crime data. I believe with Nibers and Cybers, and Eric, who is also on here, might be able to answer, because there's going to be a greater level of detail about drug use involved, and I'm not sure if it's also alcohol. Okay. We do have from our SAM study, and I'd be happy to talk with you after the meeting. It's a sample of individuals who are booked into jail, so it's not all individuals who have contact with law enforcement, but we do ask about alcohol use within the 24 hours before their arrest. And it would be, again, be a sample and not a random sample, but we do know what their highest booking charge would be. So if that would be data that you'd be interested in, we'd be happy to get that to you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Tim. Are there any other members of the public wishing to address us, Sylvia?
No, Chair, that's the end of the public address.
Great, now for members here around the virtual dais, I see Mr. Goebel, your camera's on.
Good afternoon, thank you, Chair. Please. Dr. Burke, when we talk about hate crimes, how do we differentiate that a crime was committed against somebody because of their characteristic as the primary reason versus that characteristic was incidental to the crime? How do we differentiate those two for reporting purposes?
I would not be probably giving you the scientific answer, in the sense I understand we look at, my understanding is, and I'm going to hope that one of the chiefs can turn on their camera and answer just to make sure I do it if the answer is correct. My understanding is that there's something that's very clearly stated. The other reasons we have are race, sexual orientation, disability, gender have been other issues. And there's something that's said during the event, or something, if there's destruction of property, there's some type of something that's very obvious that this is something that's because of an individual's particular characteristic. Chief Arso, are you able to verify my description? And I'm sure there's a more technical way to describe it.
Yeah, no, you're on the right track. It is specific to the way the law is written. There has to be a very articulable that the motivation of the criminal act was because of somebody's race or sexual orientation. It's more than just it's not just it's a white crime against a person of color. It has to be that person's committing a crime and there's some sort of statement or evidence that they were doing that specifically because of the other person's race or sexual orientation, those kind of things.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Goebel. Any other questions from members of the dais? Mr. Campillo, do you have a question for?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Actually, I just wanted to chime in one little bit there for Councilmember Goebel. I appreciate the response from the chief there. In my time at the city attorney's office when I was a prosecutor, in terms of dealing with hate crimes, one of the important things was for people to report hate incidences, even if there isn't an actual crime that's occurred, because multiple instances of some individual committing some level of conduct or saying words or doing anything, all those police reports build up a case when eventually, if it does turn into an actual hate crime, an assault or something, or some form of property destruction, typically it's difficult to have evidence from other instances come in a particular case, but all those things can help a prosecutor in either the DA's office or a city attorney's office build that. So that's I just wanted to add that in there as to why we want to encourage people in the public to report hate incidences just as much as reporting actual hate crimes.
It's a really good point, that paper trail, making sure that people know that that's just as important. Thank you so much, Vice Chair. Okay, are any other comments from the virtual dais here? Seeing none, we'll go on into item 7. Dr. Burke, she's all on it.
Looks like she froze. She froze.
Oh, she froze. I was like, oh my gosh, did I freeze? Okay, well, with that, we are moving on to item 7, and this will be Dr. Burke's presentation. But again, we'd like to thank everybody for joining us today for our Public Safety Committee meeting for September 17th. She is getting situated. There she is. All right, Dr. Burke, item 7.
Great, yeah. I didn't know if that was you or me.
I did the same thing. I was like, I don't know.
So thank you. Yeah. So I'm very excited to share these data with you. Drug use among the arrestee population. If we could go to the next slide, please. So this was a national study that was done, funded since 1987, and at its height, it was funded across 35 different cities in the United States. And it was the only objective measure of drug use that we had, because you get a lot of surveys. You have national household surveys. We ask students in schools about their drug use, but there's never we never have the opportunity to look at urine samples and actually do an objective measure. And when the study started, we go into local jails. We've been supported with local funding from HIDA as well as the County of San Diego since 2004, and we reduced our frequency. We go into Central Jail, Vista Jail, Las Colinas, and Juvenile Hall, which I'll be talking more about, twice a year. It's totally voluntary, confidential, and anonymous. We don't bring any information out that could tie what we find back from the individuals to them. We don't want to affect their case either positively or negatively. We want this just for research purposes. They have to voluntarily consent, and they do get an incentive for providing the urine sample. And we really do find that individuals like telling their stories, and we're there as individuals who really want to hear their story. And we've, since we've had local control of this, it's not just coming from the East Coast, we've been able to add questions over time about crossing the border for drugs, for example, or homelessness, human trafficking. So it's really been a rich data source that we're very excited to continue. And when people say, well, does it generalize to the general population? Not necessarily. Obviously, these are individuals who have had a lot of contact with the justice system enough to get booked into jail. Our booking policies have changed over time, which obviously affects our samples, but it still is the only measure to show how our drug use is going up and down among those involved in the justice system. And it really could be a precursor to show some of the things that might be affecting the more general population down the line, especially when you look at prescription drugs or fentanyl use or Oxycontin use or spice use, for example. So if we could go to the next slide, please. So I wanted to share, because last year was such an unusual year, we kept SAM going, which was kind of a miracle, quite honestly, because we wanted to take these safety and of both the individuals who are in the detention facilities as well as our interviewers who actually go to the facilities. We stopped going to Juvenile Hall and started doing the interviews virtually, and the probation department was able to help us keep getting the urine samples. But we instituted safety protocols where we shortened the instrument questions so that we'd limit the amount of time that the two individuals were dealing with each other. We had face masks, we had lots of wipes. We used to just sit across a table from individuals, and we instituted where we were on the other side of glass partition, but we were able to keep it going. But between those changes, as well as the fact that the booking policies have changed, and law enforcement interactions on the street, potentially of interacting with fewer individuals. We had fewer individuals we talked to. You can see in 2019, we talked to 469, and in 2020, it was 308. But we ended up talking to a lot more males. This was a reflection of who was getting booked into jail in 2020. And also, if you look at the highest charge, when we talked to people in 2019, about a third were drug related offenses followed by violent. You can see that we had a lot more violent offenses. Almost half of the individuals we talked to in 2020 were the adults were there for a violent offense, and only 15% for a drug offense. Next slide, please. And the juvenile samples have been declining for a long time. Appropriately, there's been a big shift towards trying to keep youth out of detention, really focusing on offering them cool beds and alternatives. And that was even greater in 2020 when Juvenile Hall instituted policies that really limited who could be booked into Juvenile Hall. So you can see that we talked to 50 individuals. Just so you know, for 2021, we started going out in the community and we're talking to youth on probation at things called achievement centers. We're not going to be getting a urine sample from those individuals, but we're still going to get the qualitative data. So I think this is an instance where the study is not continuing the way it used to be, but I think it's for a good reason because we have fewer youth in detention, which is the goal that we're all aiming for. But you can see again here, too, that we talked to more males than females. And again, in 2019, the most common offense that someone was booked into juvenile hall for was another offense, which could include some type of probation violation. And in 2020, they were more likely to be booked for a violent offense. Next slide, please. So we test for 5 drugs. We test for marijuana, methamphetamines, cocaine, crack, opiates, which could be heroin or prescription drugs, and PCP. And what this slide shows is that the blue line, which are males, we had a 21-year high in the percent of adult arrestees testing positive for drugs. 82% were positive in 2020, up from 79% the year before. For females, we had an unusual drop. They have been they're closer to the males or even higher than the males in some of the years. And they went from 82% in 2019 to 67% in 2020, which my speculation is it's based on who was getting booked into jails for the types of offenses, and that females were less likely, who are less likely to be committing the violent offenses were not booked to the same degree as the males in 2020. Juveniles were down slightly from 62 to 60%. So again, 3 in every 5 juveniles are testing positive for one of those illicit drugs when they get booked into juvenile hall. Next slide, please. This slide shows some of the major legislative activities that we've had over the years. And so we go back to 2010, and AB 109, for those of you who may not know or remember, was when a lot of the responsibilities from the state transferred locally. So individuals who prior and previous years would have been sent to prison are now both being booked into local jails. It's now local prison. They could stay up there to 20 years. They're getting out into our communities on probation instead of parole. Prop 47 reduced a number of wobblers that could have been felonies or misdemeanors that were drug or property offenses, and made them misdemeanors, which made them less likely to get booked into jail. Prop 64 made marijuana legal, and then we had COVID in 2020. But when we started seeing these changes, I didn't know what was going to happen. I thought, were we going to see lower drug rates? Because I feel like a lot of individuals may think that there's drug use and then there's criminals, and that there's not an overlap, because we've the voters have said, you know, we don't want to criminalize drug use in many cases. We want to offer alternatives. And I think it's interesting when you see those individuals who are still being booked into jail. We had the highest rate in 2019 for both males and females, and the highest rate in 2020, that even regardless of this, that many individuals who have this justice system contact are still very likely to be drug users, and they have underlying needs to be addressed, which is the purpose of showing this slide. Next slide, please. And then again, when I presented this data to individuals, sometimes they'll say, well, is it just individuals who are getting booked for drugs who are positive for drugs? And no, that's not the case. The group of bars on the left shows any drugs. The group of bars on the right shows multiple drugs. And you can see that regardless whether their highest offense was a violent, property, drug, or other, they tested around 3/4 or more tested positive for a drug. And for multiple drugs, actually property offenders were the most likely to test positive for multiple drugs. Next slide, please. So now I'm going to go through some of the drugs, and I know we're at 2 o'clock, so I'm going to speed it up there. but you know, I love this data, so I could just talk about it all day. So marijuana. So marijuana is a drug of choice for juveniles, and it's just over half, 56% were positive for it, down slightly from 57% the prior year. The second adult males were 51%. That was up from 45% the year before, and that was the second highest rate we've seen. And then females, again, were down from 39 to 31%. Next slide, please. And what I want to highlight here is, so this is juvenile data, and we have 2019 and 2020 because there were some interesting differences. And when kids were staying home, they weren't going to school. I thought it was interesting to see what some of these data are showing is that in 2020, when you look at the marijuana data, they were using it earlier. The mean age of first use was 12.5 in 2019. It was down to 11.6 even before the age of 12. 100% said it's very easy to obtain marijuana. And the frequency of use, as a parent myself, and if you've seen me do this presentation, I think I say this every time. If you look at how many days they report using marijuana on average, in 2020, they said they used it almost 19 days out of the past 30 on average. That was up from 14.7 the previous year. And I'm not saying that alcohol and tobacco, alcohol is not going to hurt you, but they seem to be using that more on weekends, while marijuana is more likely to be used every other day. And you can see the high percentage that have ever tried it. And we also have almost half said that it's the first substance that they've ever tried, higher than both alcohol and tobacco. Next slide, please. We asked the youth how bad they think different drugs are for them. And this shows the data from 2020. You can see that 20% think that marijuana could be harmful for somebody, while 36% think alcohol, 48% think vaping could be. Next slide. And again, I think these data are useful for prevention practitioners. If you know anybody who's writing a grant trying to do prevention activities around the region. In 2007, when we first asked this question, we asked, how bad do you think it is? And you can see 42% thought marijuana was bad, 45% thought alcohol was bad, 66% was tobacco. 2020, 13 years later, you can see the big drop, which I think does coincide with legalization and thinking that there's no harmful effects because it's natural. Only 20%, as the other slide said. There's been a decrease for alcohol, but not to the same degree, and around the same percentage think that tobacco is bad. There hasn't been a decrease for tobacco. Next slide, please. Vaping has been a big concern, and was not something that we had years ago. Almost 84% said that they've ever vaped. 2/3 have vaped at school. They perceive it as less harmful than smoking. About a quarter have gotten actually physically sick from vaping. They prefer it to smoking cigarettes. Again, they're smoking at vaping about half the days in the month, and they're more likely to vape flavored nicotine as well as vaping THC. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Another question I've gotten is, are the individuals, when you say that they're positive for any drug, are they just are they only positive for marijuana? And this answered that question. So we've included this in presentation since that question was asked, that 61% of the individuals who are positive for any drug are positive for both marijuana and something else, not only marijuana. So I'm sorry, of those who are positive for marijuana, 2/3 of those are positive for marijuana and something else, whether it's opiates, cocaine, crack, or meth. Next slide, please. And potency, again, is a big issue. The marijuana that was available 20, 30 years ago is not the marijuana that's out there now. 66% of the adults that we talk to who still use marijuana say that, yes, they think the potency has increased. About 29% say it stayed the same, and 5% think it's actually decreased. Next slide, please. And I think this is a really great slide too, especially for the policymakers on the panel. We asked the adult arrestees, how did you obtain marijuana? Now that it's legally available for recreational use, do you buy it on the street? Do you go to a recreational dispensary? Do you go to a medical? Do you get it delivered to you? And you can see that 38% bought it just one way. Most of them say, I buy it multiple ways. So they're not only, now that it's legal, they're not just buying it at the dispensaries. Now, those individuals who said that they bought it one way, the most common way was still on the street. They'll say it's easier. I have my person. I don't have to pay taxes. Of those who can use it, who have gotten it multiple ways, the most common way, almost all still have gotten it at the dispensary, recreational, 3/4 medical or delivery, and then but 3/4 are still saying that they get it on the street. Other ways are my friend gives it to me, I grow it myself. Next slide, please. Driving and DUIs. And I know that the state's been trying to figure out how do they do the best test for marijuana. Any stats on driving under the influence, if someone's positive already for alcohol, my understanding from talking with the sheriff's department is that they don't do a test for any other drugs if they already know that there's, and the council member might be able to speak on that from the city attorney's office. But this is, I think, just a really telling slide. We ask 2 questions. First is, do you think marijuana affects your driving ability? And then have you ever driven under the influence of marijuana? And you can see that it's about split. Half, 55% think that marijuana does impact one's driving ability. 45% think it doesn't. And I'm not sure which of these is more disturbing, that half of those who do think it impacts still say that they've driven under the influence, or that 3/4 of those who don't think it impacts are driving under the influence. So that was one of the issues we saw when we first went to Colorado prior to legalization. And I think it's still an ongoing discussion and issue. Next slide, please. Meth is the drug of choice for San Diego County arrestees. You can see 57% of male arrestees, which was a 21-year high, were positive for meth in 2020. That was up from 55%. 53% of the females were positive. Last year it was 66%, and juveniles 6% in 2020. Next slide, please. I think this is an interesting slide. Back in 2012 was the last year that there was race difference in meth use. And prior to that, we had seen that it really was more likely to be a drug that individuals who identified as white or Caucasian were most likely to use. But that difference is no longer significant in 2020, and meth is being used. So I'm not sure if that's drug distribution networks, availability of cocaine or crack, but really it's not something that's just something that individuals who are white, not Hispanic, are using. Next slide, please. This was a CJ Flash we did last year, and I wanted to update the data. It's kind of the chicken and egg question. Many times meth could induce mental health issues, or individuals who have mental health issues, are they using meth to self-medicate? So it's a complicated issue, but we did show that individuals who said that they had ever tried meth were more likely to say they've ever been diagnosed for a mental health issue, to have an overnight stay in a mental health facility, as well as to have made a prior suicide attempt. So just, again, talking about psychosis, it could be related or in some way to drug use, not necessarily causation. Next slide, please. Opiates, we know that there's been a lot of discussion about opiates across the country. It's still not the drug of choice, and among our arrestee population, 11% of males were positive for opiates. And again, that could be heroin or a prescription opiate in 2020, compared to 6% of females. Next slide, please. But what we have seen are that younger arrestees, when we were doing the study back in 2007, you could see only 4% of those who were positive for an opiate were under the age of 25. That's 18% in 2020. So it's kind of flipped. It was more likely to be the older individuals, and now those who are the younger are more likely to test positive than those who are actually 40 and over. Next slide, please. And again, we're more likely to see that those younger arrestees we talked to are more likely to report ever abusing prescription drugs. Next slide. I know there's been a lot of talk in the paper, and one of our most recent CJ Flashes was looking at fentanyl and naloxone. Fentanyl is a highly potent drug, and I know there's a lot of debate on how someone could OD on it, but it's obviously very fatal to individuals who are consuming it. And I think one of the important things here, and again, if anybody who's on the committee would like to speak to this, what I've heard on the street is that the drug dealers know that fentanyl is cheaper. They can put it into drugs that someone may not even be thinking contains it. And because their weight varies, somebody, if they're not mixing it up well, could get fentanyl even without intending to do it. The good news is we found out that only 9% of the arrestees we said knew that they would buy a drug if it contained fentanyl. But when we did in our CJ Flash, we looked at those who were positive for opiates and asked them how their responses differed. And 47% said they would buy it because that's the high that they were looking for. Another statistic here that's not very positive is that more than 1 in 4 of the individuals said that they think that they'd used a drug that contained fentanyl in it because of the effect, even though that wasn't their intention to buy it. So I think that whole availability of fentanyl is something that's still important to educate the public about. And the naloxone, it's great that we have it. We're to do harm reduction and try to address overdosing. 45% of those who said that they had ever overdosed on an opiate had been administered naloxone. But I think, and this was a number that I was startled to see for the first time, the mean number of times they've gotten it is 3.5. So really, you know, we talk about that there's relapse as part of recovery, but just really trying to use every opportunity we can from a public health motive, I think is important to try to offer people treatment and to try to offer them that opportunity to get the help they need, especially in these situations. I've heard anecdotally from law enforcement that they'll see people repeated times overdosing on the drugs. So how do we keep them healthy, but get them the help that they need? Next slide, please. And these are the last couple slides. We added a COVID addendum last year. We shortened a number of questions, but we did wanted to know how is this, we're very concerned about equity at Sandag, and these individuals obviously have a lot of underlying needs. They're some of the most facing greatest challenges in the region. And those who were in the justice system said their employment had been negatively impacted. 41% said that there had been increased substance use on their part during the pandemic. Their mental health had been impacted, and about 1 in 5 said they also had decreased access to social services. Next slide, please. And then again, those who said that they had an employment challenge or a mental health challenge, again, were more likely to report increased substance use. So again, when I was speaking on the crime data, I said, I really do think the effect of the pandemic, the direct and indirect effects are going to be long lasting, but I think that is my last data slide.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Burke. Are there any members of the public wishing to address us on this item, Ms. Sylvia?
No, Chair, there are no members of the public that wish to address it.
Great, I do have several members who have raised their hands. So Councilmember Goebel, you're up first.
Thank you, Chair. Dr. Burke, the slide on naloxone there, probably slide 24 or something like that. And it was, boy, that's telling to say that the average use was 3.5 times. Here's an interesting thought, is now that Narcan is more out there with first responders, probably most police cars carry naloxone. I think surely the firefighter EMS carry naloxone. I carry naloxone in my truck because I got trained in a half-hour video. It was easy to do. And 3.5 times tells me that sometimes they feel a false sense of security that, oh, if I OD on fentanyl, there will be naloxone nearby. Someone will save me. The police will get to me fast, the firefighters. And that's kind of a dangerous false sense of security among drug users if that's the case. Here at El Cajon, we use Narcan. Our police and firefighters use it more than 1 time a day, and that's in 14 square miles. So I think your CJ Flash last year said that the firefighter, EMS, and the Sheriff's Department had administered 2,500 times, or an average of 7 times a day among their jurisdictions. So my question is, do we have any demographics on the use of naloxone filter through all the agencies? As we talk about equity, we could talk about homelessness versus those who are not homeless, or we could talk about other demographics and trying to find patterns to say, hey, maybe we should reach this community, or wow, it's a big impact among this kind of community and would help us steer resources. Do we get those demographics from the agencies?
Well, so thank you for bringing this up. And this was something that you and I have discussed about coming to a future PSC meeting.
Yes.
And Chief Urso, I'm not sure if you've got any information from the seconds. It's been, I know that the Sheriff's Department and the District Attorney's Office was trying to do a mapping effort to really show where getting EMS data, getting data from law enforcement to show where has it been administered. Obviously it can be privately administered and that data wouldn't be there. and the LACC is trying to work on that and get that together. So I'm going to see if we can get a presentation before the end of the year coming with that data. It's not data that we have because it's really trying to get it. And I'm not sure what all the barriers have been to get that data, but I know that there's a lot of individuals in our public safety community who are trying to do that, again, to share that type of information.
Yeah, I just see the stats of opiate overdose deaths just continuing just to climb rapidly. And it seems if we're able to get the data to zero in on who or where, that would be an efficient use of resources and saving lives. It also would tell us, coincidentally, how many lives our law enforcement and firefighters save each year. We could be saving countywide over 5,000 lives through the use of naloxone. And that's a good story too.
Very much agree so.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Goebel. Vice Chair Campillo.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Dr. Burke, for your presentation and how detailed and really thorough it was. I'm curious to know, is the data further stratified by municipality as opposed to just countywide?
You know, the ends can get a little bit small.
Yeah.
And so that's my one consider, you know, we've thought about putting the data out there where people can look at it, but then, you know, if you have like 2 people in East County and it's 4, so that's the limitation. But if there's something that you'd like us to look at, especially on a particular variable for, we do have data that's available by looking around the county MSA areas. Is it central? Is it south? Is it North City? Is it, you know, northeast, northwest? And we do ask where they live. We have data on homelessness. I didn't include that in today's presentation, but if there's anything you'd like to look at, we definitely can try to dig down and then offer the qualifications with the ends if possible.
That's awesome. I appreciate that. We definitely will follow up on that. Thank you. I guess there's one very specific thing. I'm not sure if you mentioned this. I was looking at the multiple methods which adults obtain cannabis. There's delivery service, dispensaries, street pickup, and then there's that other category. Did you mention what was in that? What's the other method?
So it'd be well, you know, drug users are very generous because they'll often tell us that people just give it to them. Okay. Or they may grow it themselves, but a lot of it's like, oh, I was with somebody and they just gave it to me. That's how I just get it.
Okay, understood. I think the other detail that jumped out to me was that opiate rates amongst female arrestees dropped significantly. Do we have a sense of why that might be, and if there was a specific targeting or program directed to try to do that?
You know, we saw the same big drop for meth and then any drug overall. And again, Chief Urso, I'm going to put you on the hot seat again. My sense is that males are more likely, when you see that the population of who's been booked into jail in 2020 during COVID was more likely to be violent offenders, and females are less likely. I think that females just generally are less likely to be committing the offenses that got them booked into jail to be part of our sample, and that those who did really have a lot of underlying issues. That would be my hypothesis. I don't know if Chief Urso, from being on the street more and knowing what it was like out there last year.
Yeah, I would agree with Dr. Burke. There was obviously a lot of restricted booking criteria put into place to deal with COVID in the jails. So the overwhelming majority of your property crime offenses, your drug offenses were no longer bookable. Most of them are still not bookable at this point. So yeah, I would agree. You know, the volume of, just from data, violent crime is mostly a male perpetrated kind of event. And so that would account for that drop in number.
Understood. Thank you. Thank you very much for that response. Only thing I'll add, Chair, is that a couple months ago, the Attorney General of California, Rob Bonta, was down in San Diego. I had the chance to chat with him very briefly, and he asked me, based on my experience from working at the city attorney's office, what I thought his office should be emphasizing and focusing on. And I emphasized the fact that methamphetamine is just such a big problem, both because of the effects it has on people, and also the fact that people who are using it because they think they need it to either stay awake. I know a lot of unsheltered individuals use methamphetamine for the first time when they're actually are unsheltered because they're nervous about the violence they might suffer in the middle of the night or wherever they are. So, and then of course they get addicted to it. So I really appreciate Dr. Burke and you and everyone you work with for bringing this detail these stats to our attention, because it really confirms my anecdotal, though I did prosecute a lot of cases, I'd still say it's anecdotal compared to what you have. I definitely wasn't, collecting data as scientifically as you all had. So to the extent that we talk to policymakers at the state and federal level, I would just encourage everyone to mention that 57% of the men and 53% of the women who are arrested in San Diego County, based on this study, tested positive for methamphetamine. It's just shocking how high it is. But with that concludes my questions and comments, Chair.
Great, thank you so much, Vice Chair. I did have one question on slide 4, where you had mentioned that the data collection is just slightly different. I just wanted to ask if you felt that the data that you're now collecting is still robust as the prior data collection, because it was one of the there you go. And you had mentioned that you weren't getting the urine samples, but you were still engaging, or so if you could just clarify then.
So over when I first started doing this, juvenile arrest rates were higher than adult arrest rates. And there's been a big change in who gets booked into juvenile hall. And we want to offer a lot of protections for juveniles, obviously. So our numbers over time, and the number, this does reflect, I want to say, a random sample. We get most of the youth that we talk to. It's a random sample of who's booked into juvenile hall, but the population of who's been booked into juvenile hall has really shrunk down. Again, they really need to be committing a violent offense. As you can see, they're almost over half. And so I think that we're seeing smaller numbers there in that way. I think that this data still reflects who's in the hall. Does it reflect all juveniles or other, because there's so many alternatives, it's not reflecting as wide a group of youth potentially as in the past. And that's why we are trying to go out and talk to youth in the achievement centers. But because we are out and they're not under probation supervision in juvenile hall, we're not going to get the urine samples from them. We're trying very hard to walk that line of protecting the youth and especially, human protection when we do research. And so we will continue to get data, and we're going to keep going to juvenile hall. It's just that the sample that we'll get the urine samples from for juveniles will be smaller. Adults will not be affected.
Got it. Okay. Well, I appreciate that clarification. Are there, I don't know if I already asked if there were any members of the public, but Sylvia, could we double check if there's any members of the public?
There are no members of the public for this item.
Fabulous. Thank you again, Dr. Burke, for the presentation.
Thank you.
We'll now move on to item 7. We have Division Chief Norton, who will be addressing us on this item.
Welcome, everybody hear me?
We can hear you.
All right, let me put my video on. I'm working from home and I apologize if my dogs decide to bark. So thanks for having me. Chief Vogt had reached out to me about 4 months ago, asked me to present on a project that I've been working on with San Diego County Fire District. So just a little bit of background real quick for me. I've been with the county for about 1.5 years, grew up in San Diego, and I have about 34, 35 years in emergency services. So if we bring the PowerPoint up, we'll move from there. So a little bit of background. The Regional Public Safety Geodatabase, or RPSG, has been in existence in the county for quite a while. Basically, it's a repository for multiple GIS layers and services that were utilized by the fire departments primarily. They were accessed and pushed out through computer-aided dispatch or other mechanisms and visible to units in the field. About 1.5 years ago, the RPSG transitioned over to the Fire Authority at the time, which was under the county OES. Now it's the Fire District. Used to be managed through the city of Chula Vista through UASI funding. Chief Meacham, wearing his county fire chief's hat, has taken the authority to manage this program and make the data visible to everybody in the county. When I say that is, we're only managing it, so I put this together utilizing Intterra as a common operating picture, which is visible to any emergency services agency in the county. So we manage it, but it is truly a countywide collaboration of data sets, services, which are visible either through computer terminals and fire engines that could be in police cruisers. It is county OES, it can be the city EOCs, anybody that would like to utilize it. So the short version of it is there's a lot of GIS layers that are kept by multiple different sources out there. Cities have their own, counties have their own. There could be regional, it could be state, it could be federal. This brings all those into a single place so that they can be accessed through a common operating picture, and whatever sets of services or data want to be used by the end user, they can. Next slide, please. So just real brief, the risk management cycle, this is what our Intterra instance is all about. So basically what Intterra is, it's a data integrator. They'll take all these different services and data sets, they'll put them into one place and manage it for us. That becomes visible through either a computer, it can be a notebook, it can be a computer and a fire engine, whatever the end user prefers to use, that's where it's visible. So this management cycle shows the value of everything across the board. The mitigate and prepare, everything before an incident, then you have the event. That's when everything that you put into this is used to basically effectively manage the event. Then you respond, you recover, you learn from it, and this process starts all over again. Next slide. So I know this is a little bit busy, but the short version of this is, and I'll read from my notes a little bit. So like I said, Intterra is more or less a data integrator. So all these different services come into one place. Brings in the state services, the local data sets, so that if, we'll say National City Police, for example, wants to use that for a community outreach, a police operation, or whatever else, the pre-plans for the apartment complexes that are built into this, they can use directly with the police department, with the fire department. So on the pre-side of it can be used to prepare for an event. If there is actually an event, the AVL from those resources can be turned on and visualize where those resources physically are during that incident. This was originally focused to be wildland specific or fire department specific, but it's now morphed into a truly regional collaboration of all hazards types events. So it's not limited to fire. It can be search and rescue operations. It could be planning for fuels reduction projects, defensible space projects, home hardening projects, whatever it's going to be, all these things fall into one place. Then on the backside, following an incident, you'll be able to bring in those ignition points, bring in those fire perimeters so that you can actually learn how did these treatments that the state has put so much money into, how effective were they in preventing the loss of life or property? So in brief, we brought in about 150 plus or minus data sets from all different levels. Just to highlight, there's environmental, there's pre-plans, both structural and wildland. Downlink video, which I'll give you an example of, which can be used during an incident. Seismic faults, real-time data for earthquakes, automated vehicle location, computer-aided dispatch, fire perimeters, models, infrastructure, cameras, census information real-time that'll give you the demographics for a community that might be impacted by an event. All that can be brought up real-time. The other thing that I'll display here in just a minute is we have actually partnered pretty closely with UCSD with their, not just their seismic side, but also with their alert wildfire and HPRN programs to bring in the multiple wildfire cameras you see, not just in San Diego County, but all over the state. So all these things come in, all these collaborative conversations occur. And the cool thing is this is all visible in one place across jurisdictional boundaries. Important to bring that up, as Chief Voted discussed, all the fires that have occurred up in Northern California, or the bulk of them, and even fires in San Diego County, both small and large. Typically what starts in one agency's jurisdiction has a high likelihood, especially with the climate today, burning into multiple jurisdictions. So being able to share this across jurisdictional boundaries is key. And that's what really this slide kind of demonstrates here. It's how it can share between different common operating pictures. So I should clarify that no one common operating picture, including what we have here with Intterra, can do everything. What makes them successful is they talk across jurisdictional lines so that if CAL FIRE, for example, wants to use something different, or Cal OES, these different common operating pictures need to talk to each other. And that's our direction where we're trying to take this to. So as far as the RPSG goes, a Regional Public Safety Geodatabase, it is a working group. It meets once a month with the goal being to bring in not just operations, but also the GIS expertise from the various agencies, state agencies as well throughout the area, so that we're all on the same page. The challenge with this remains, however, we want to be able to tier this information out, or the intelligence out, so that it doesn't overly impact the end user. So what a firefighter on a fire engine may need is definitely not the same thing that a city manager will need. So they'll have different levels or different access so that they can bring in as many data layers as they want to meet the needs of the end user. Next slide. So this is just sort of some brief snapshots of what's out there. So real-time situational awareness. This is the computer-aided dispatch information that's been brought in from a Metro Fire, so San Diego City. So real-time as far as where those resources are across jurisdictional boundaries, and the resource strength is a snapshot for the command centers or dispatch centers to see what resources they have committed and what are available. Next slide. Just an example of bringing up the incident information of this is a traffic accident on a freeway in this case, but real time throughout the county is the goal so that everybody has a snapshot on what's going on. Next slide. Another example, the SIT-STAT monitor, this just kind of averages drive times on the closest routes to respond. Next slide. This is an example, and to Chief Vote's point, we send resources from multiple agencies through mutual aid throughout the state. It is comforting, I think, for the home unit fire chiefs and operations chiefs to know where their resources are. So this does capture those resources that are in AVL on whatever incident they are throughout the state of California. So this was the Creek Fire from last year, but the same thing would apply to any fire where they applied or responded on mutual aid. Next slide. So just in summary with this, so the San Diego County Integrated Pre-Plan Project, or the RPSG, is a true collaboration across jurisdictional boundaries. Agency developed pre-plans visible through a common operating picture to all agencies was the foundation. We have since brought in everything across the board, like I said, from seismic to environmental to industrial areas, you name it, it is in here. It's going to be a constant evolution based on feedback from the end user. But the goal at the end of the day is to provide actionable intelligence to the end user through one common operating picture so that they don't have to go through multiple different websites and whatnot to get that information. I think that was the last slide. A couple more. This is an example of the structural pre-plans, which are built right onto a base map. So I know I don't have a lot of time to go over it real time, but if you can imagine with this is an apartment complex that was built in Intterra by an engine company. So if there's an actual incident in here or a police incident, whatever else, the AVL will demonstrate where those resources physically are on a base map so that they can have that actionable intelligence to know where their resources are and where they're going to be committed to. Next slide. This is also hyperlinked to a standard PDF in case there's a technology failure. Next slide. And that is standard across the board. As far as wildland urban interface type responses, there are pre-plans built throughout the county. When you click on these icons, they will bring up those physical pre-plans, which will be visible not just during an incident, but could be used for training purposes as well. Next slide. And this is a wildfire pre-attack plan, which is a large scale area that we built out in the Warner Springs area. That just demonstrates there's a scout reservation in there. There's wildland urban interface plans in there. It basically puts us one step ahead of the game if there's a fire so we can take action and have a plan ahead of time. Next slide. The cameras, this is the HP Ren cameras. They are integrated into the system as well, so they are viewable. This is a University of California, San Diego product, so we integrate with them. Next slide. And this is just to demonstrate the administrative boundaries, so we'll know if that fire is impacting multiple jurisdictions, cross-city boundaries or whatnot. Next slide. And for evacuation planning, which is also super important with this, is you can plan for where you want to send residents to if a fire may impact their community. Next slide. So the uses of it in the county are many. Like I said, we want to not create the issue where you're fighting to access data during an incident. We want it to be there ahead of time. We want it to be simplified, improving the ability to make decisions quickly and effectively. We are pushing this out to, like I said, tablets, to mobile data computers in the fire engines, as well as digital wall maps in the fire stations. So that will be it for the PowerPoint.
All right, outstanding. Thank you, Chief Norton. Any questions?
One more piece for you. I just want to show you real time.
Uh-oh, real time. Okay. All right, everybody, stand by. We're going to do some
share my screen.
Can we give Chief Norton a vision, ability to share the screen? There we go.
Okay, so this is actually instance real time. Fortunately, we're not having any fires occur in San Diego as we speak. So this brought up a map of the Valley Fire that was last year in the Jamul area. So this is the map. So if you can imagine, this map is real time brought in from an aircraft. We have the ability to bring in, this is recorded, but I want to at least show you what we can bring in real time from aircraft that are physically flying on fires right now. This is recorded, but kind of accomplishes the end result.
Orange County Intel 2-4, 9/11/2021, 18:17 hours. We're over the route fire. This is on the Angeles National Forest on both sides of Interstate 5 in the geographic area of Oak Flat in Los Angeles County. The fire's mapped at 392 acres. We're looking from the south towards the north. This is the hottest part of the fire that's on the west side of Interstate 5, currently being held at the ridge with retardant cans.
So on the sake of time, I'll just give you that snapshot, but that is during an incident brought in real time. That can be plumbed into Intterra to the back of a command vehicle or to a tablet in the fire engine. They also will import a perimeter data as well as a model to show you where that fire may go and what communities it may impact. Just real briefly, some of the things we have in here as far as cameras. So basically, these are the HPRN cameras. You click on the camera, you click on there, and you have the real-time image that's going to show up on that ridge top.
Wow.
Like I said, that's available at any time.
And Chief, I just wanted to share that this is this also too available for members of the public, or is it just the network, the folks that are networked in?
So the way we put this together, because everything during an incident is considered intelligence and we don't want to mislead the public, so it's password protected, but anybody as far as emergency services can have access to it. For the public, our thought with this is it's a public education tool. So we can put together a public view during an incident. That really depends on what direction the county wants to go with things. More importantly, if it's something that the city's emergency manager wants to use to put this out for public presentations, it's a great tool to put all those pieces together with it.
Okay, great.
So that's the camera portion of it. As far as AVL, basically on real time at any map, if you click on the AVL, it will show you any resource assigned to an incident. So even though there's nothing assigned right here, I can back out. These little icons will show up. I can click on that icon. It'll tell you what unit it is. So that's all real time for situational awareness. Just real quick on the pre-plans. They're built into these maps. So if a responding unit is going into a neighborhood, wherever else, where there is a more complex type of a business or whatever in the area, those will show up real time in here. So you see them start to populate. Any of the specific information about how to access where the fire department connections are, hydrants, will show up. And then the AVL will basically visualize where this incident is and where the resources are in relation to that. So if you can imagine a fire impacting a community, they will be able to see real time that there are this many people in this community. You can also use the census tool on it to see what the makeup of that community is based on age, demographics, total population, housing units, whatever else. That also shows up in real time in this as well. So it's a really powerful tool in one place. Same thing with the wildland pre-plans, like I said. Fire history is very important when it comes to planning. We did bring in any weather layer you want. So if there is a flood, an advisory, whatever else coming, all that will be populated in here real time as well. The earthquake part of it, you actually can populate if there's an earthquake. It will show you the epicenter, the magnitude, and also for planning purposes where the fault lines are. Probably one of the most important things in this is the county's evacuation grids are listed in here. So all the evacuations, obviously it's a law enforcement responsibility, but these grids will show you what grids or subgrids are going to be evacuated during an incident. So this could be turned on in the back of the command post with a law enforcement representative as well as fire there. They can mutually decide what areas are going to be evacuated. That is pushed out real time to county OES. County OES in return, when they send out their evacuation warnings, orders, or whatever other important information, they grab that, it gets pushed back out, and all of that information, icons and shading on these district grids will show up real time based on a color code, what has been evacuation ordered, what has been evacuation warned, and where the evacuation centers are. So that was one of the big asks from County OES, is they were really slow in getting any information specifically from an incident. Now that they can get this and they have access to this and trained to it, it's almost simultaneous that when it's decided, they get it, they can push the notification back out. And it could also be visual to the cities, to the fire districts, anybody else out there, so that they can make those good decisions. So like I said, I could go on this for hours and hours because I'm kind of a geek with it, but there is a ton of value with this across the board. I just wanted to reiterate that the county fire district is funding this. It is available to any emergency services in the county, as well as city and other local emergency management agencies. We've trained all the fire departments to it. We are working now, we've trained Carlsbad's Emergency Management Center on it, and anybody else that is interested in it. This tool is out there and available to them, and I can provide any more focused training if everybody wants it. So in the sake of time, I will call that. If there are any questions, feel free.
Fabulous. Thank you again so much, Chief. I really appreciated the slide where you showed where all the fire hydrants are at. Not everybody is familiar with the environment that they are going into. And so being able to just click, click, click and see that, I think that's tremendous. Again,
it works really, really well. It's real time, and there's actually a dedicated GIS person with the county fire department. 20% of her time is dedicated to making sure all this stuff is accurate. So, wow. And it's available across, like I said, jurisdictional boundaries, and that's the whole intent with it.
And last question I have is, how long is this project being funded for? I know you said you're waiting for the county. So is this in perpetuity? Are we looking at 2 years?
Yeah, it moved over. So originally it was part of County OES. And then when the fire district was formed with Chief Meacham, still the fire chief, along with Herman Reddick is on the other side of it. It basically transitioned over to the fire district, and it is funded with Intterra under contract for the next 5 years, but it's in perpetuity with the fire district. So this is a long-term project. We didn't want things to keep going back and forth because, as you know, that happens all too much. So I think we're in a pretty good place with it. It's just going to be the challenge of keeping the ball moving forward with retirements and transitions and everything else.
Great. I think, again, having a tool that goes beyond and lives beyond, certain people's tenures, because we have people that are very, very excited about data and GIS mapping and the whole nine. But when they leave, sometimes it's a little harder to keep the ball rolling in this.
Yeah, and that was the beautiful thing with this is we brought it in. It works very well. I should mention there was a donation to the Fire Foundation last year by SDG&E. I want to say it was around $100,000. And Chair Fletcher was who accepted that along with Chief Meacham last year. So he was involved with that on the front side of it, and we'll keep that ball rolling.
Excellent. All right. I believe that is Chief vote.
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you to Chief Norton for coming on and giving this presentation, and for everybody on the committee for hanging with the presentation late into a Friday afternoon. But it really is important. And I have to tell you, I think there's enough folks on this line that will understand, because We're all old enough to remember using Thomas Brothers maps before the age of Google Maps and the technology that we have. And if you can imagine trying to make decisions out in the field with the wind blowing and the fire raging, you know, with maps on the hood of a vehicle, this is such a leap forward to help us. And what it comes down to is to make faster decisions that are more reliable and more effective. And it applies to the suppression strategy and tactics that we choose to engage in. The evacuation, the areas, the level of evacuation, the duration of the evacuations that are going to take place, the planning cycles, not just what's happening right now, but what's going to happen the next day or 2 days or 3 days later. And then lastly, the financial component, right? So we have the Fire Management Assistant Grant that depends upon having information to justify that grant ultimately from FEMA, and also getting local and state emergency and disaster declarations in place. All of this platform helps all of those things happen much more efficiently, much more effective, and most importantly, faster, which helps get the incident under control quicker and helps get the assistance to the people who need it faster.
Great. And it's that type of response that the emergency personnel that's on the ground needs and should have access to. And those that do want to learn more as an educational tool. And who knows, maybe it could lead to a pipeline and career in public safety. But learning how to use those tools, I think, is essential. So thank you again for the presentation, Chief Norton. We now, Ms. Sylvia, did we have any members of the public wishing to address us on this item?
Chair, there are no public members that wish to address item number 8.
Great. Any other comments from the PSC members? Seeing none, with that, we will now adjourn for our next Public Safety Committee meeting that is currently scheduled for Friday, October 15th, 2021 at 1 p.m. We stand adjourned. Thank you again. Have a great night.
Thank you, everyone. Good night.